You wake up with a fever. Your skin is burning up. Every single muscle aches in that deep, exhausting way that makes just rolling over feel like a monumental task. Now look around. There is no pharmacy down the street, no 24-hour clinic, no doctor waiting a few minutes away to write you a prescription. What do you actually do? Seriously, think about that for a second. If you had to survive a severe illness right now with absolutely zero modern medicine, what's your game plan? Let me know down in the comments because I genuinely want to see who here is confident in their survival skills. Here's the crazy thing. For most of human history, this wasn't some fun thought experiment. This was reality. For roughly 300,000 years, every human being who ever lived faced sickness without hospitals, without antibiotics, without any modern medicine. And yet, your ancestors survived. So how did they do it? Well, the answer is a lot stranger and, honestly, a lot more beautiful than most people imagine. A lot of us tend to assume that back in the ancient world, if you got seriously ill, that was it. You simply died. And sometimes, yeah, they did. But the archaeological evidence tells a much more complicated story. It turns out your survival didn't begin in a hospital. It began around a fire. Let me give you one of the most famous examples. Deep inside a cave in what is now Iraq, researchers found the remains of a Neanderthal known as Shenidar 1. Picture this. This individual had been through absolute hell. One arm was badly damaged. One eye was likely blind. His skeleton showed several bones that had actually healed after severe trauma. Yet, despite all of this, he lived for years after those injuries occurred. How? Those injuries were so serious that anthropologists agree he could not have survived alone. Someone helped him. Someone brought him food. Someone offered protection and kept him alive when he couldn't care for himself. This discovery, brought to light by archaeologist Ralph Selecki, changes the story completely. It suggests that compassion might just be one of humanity's oldest survival tools. It completely challenged that old image of prehistoric humans as these brutal creatures concerned only with themselves. Instead, they looked surprisingly human. Because they were. When we imagine surviving in the ancient world, it's so easy to just focus on the plants, the remedies, and the hardcore survival skills. And those definitely mattered. But social support mattered even more. Research by James Sussman on modern hunter-gatherer societies shows us exactly how this worked. Cooperation essentially functioned as a prehistoric form of insurance. When one person can't hunt, others share food. When one family struggles, another steps in to help, and the entire group absorbs the shock. This system existed long before modern governments or insurance companies. Could a sick person survive alone in the wild? Sometimes, but a lone human was vulnerable. A connected human was resilient. Let's zoom back in. Picture a typical morning tens of thousands of years ago. You wake up inside a simple shelter, a small fire still glowing from the night before. Your head feels incredibly heavy. Your throat burns. You know something is deeply wrong. There's no thermometer to check your temp, no medical diagnosis. Out here, there is only experience. The older members of your group, they've seen these exact symptoms before. They know rest matters. They know warmth matters. They might not use the word dehydration, but they know how dangerous it can be. So, they bring you water. They bring you food. They encourage you to stay near the fire. Simple actions, powerful effects. Because here's the thing, many illnesses actually improve when the body simply gets time, fluids, calories, and protection. Even today, your immune system does the heavy lifting. Doctors often support the process. They don't replace it. Ancient humans lacked modern medicine, sure, but they didn't lack biology. Long before hospitals were a thing, your body was already a battlefield. White blood cells hunted down invaders. Inflammation isolated threats. Fever created an environment that made it harder for pathogens to thrive. The system just worked. And could ancient people use natural medicines? Absolutely. Through pure observation and trial and error, they figured out that certain leaves reduced pain, certain roots eased stomach issues, certain barks lowered fevers. But how did that information survive? Anthropologist Polly Weissner points out something fascinating. Information was literally as valuable as food. A useful remedy discovered by one person could save hundreds of lives generations later. And they preserved this practical knowledge long before books existed through something we still depend on, storytelling. Think about the sheer challenge of this. You don't know what causes disease. You've never heard of bacteria or viruses because you can't even see them. Yet you notice patterns. People who drink from that one stagnant water source get sick. People who stay near waste become ill. Over generations, those observations shaped human behavior. Not because anyone understood microbiology, but because human beings are ultimate pattern-detecting machines. And that skill? That's what helped your ancestors survive. This story of survival gets even more fascinating when researchers look at ancient teeth and bones. These remains are literally biological records preserving clues about nutrition, disease, stress, and healing. And they show us that life back then wasn't just a picture of constant misery. People lived with disabilities, they survived chronic conditions, and some reached surprisingly old ages. Life was incredibly hard, sure, but humans adapted. But here is where history throws us a massive plot twist. Consider what happened roughly 12,000 years ago when agriculture arrived in many regions. Most of us naturally assume that farming immediately improved human health, right? We settled down, grew our own food, built villages, progress. But the reality was a lot more complicated. When researchers examine the sites of early farmers, they often find that these populations actually experienced worse health than some of the hunter-gatherers who came before them. Suddenly, their diets became much less diverse. Population density increased drastically. You had humans living packed closely together, which created an entirely new challenge. Infectious diseases could spread far more easily. This is one of history's great surprises. The very development that so many people associate with progress actually introduced serious, entirely new health risks. So, why does that matter? Because it reveals a fundamental truth about us. Human survival has never depended on one single magical solution. Every single major advance creates a new set of problems, and every new problem demands a new adaptation. And you know what? That exact same pattern is playing out right now. Sure, modern medicine saves millions of lives today, which is incredible. But at the same time, so many of our modern illnesses are deeply linked to lifestyles our ancestors never even experienced. Chronic stress, physical inactivity, sleep disruption, and social isolation. It's a different era with entirely different dangers. But the core principle remains exactly the same. Humans survive by adapting. Let's zoom in one last time. Imagine an especially brutal winter. Food is scarce, several people in your group are sick, and the weather outside is unforgiving. There is no rescue team coming. No supply truck. No emergency room waiting just over the horizon. What actually keeps those people alive? Cooperation, resource sharing, accumulated knowledge, emotional support. These aren't just modern, feel-good concepts. They are ancient technologies. In fact, long before metal tools, before farming, and before writing ever existed, humans mastered cooperation. That single ability is what transformed a vulnerable primate into the most successful large mammal on Earth. Today, when you get sick, modern medicine absolutely matters. Vaccines matter. Antibiotics matter. The achievements of medical science are nothing short of extraordinary. But beneath all of those modern achievements lies a much older foundation. The exact same foundation that protected your ancestors. The remarkable reality is that ancient humans didn't survive without doctors because they were somehow tougher or more invincible than you. They survived because they possessed the exact same biology you possess right now, and they depended on the exact same social instincts you still carry. Your immune system is ancient. Your need for community is ancient. So the next time you recover from an illness, it's worth remembering that the healing process actually begins long before you ever pick up a prescription. Your body fights. Your mind adapts. Other people help. You wake up with a fever. Today, help might arrive through a doctor, but for most of human history, help arrived through another human sitting right beside the fire.